Welcome, everyone. You're listening to the Elk Junkie podcast. I am Lance Garner. I'll be your host today. I am joined by Dave Morris. Dave just recently got back from an interesting little tour, if you will, that I like to call Donkey Town. So, Dave, why don't you highlight with this little visit you had to what I call Donkey Town?
Sweet. No, my employees are working out of Bullhead City, Arizona, and I had to bring them down some supplies so they could keep working. And I was out traveling the hills with the client. He was just showing me the area, and he mentioned this town of Oatman, Arizona, just as it sounds, Oatman, I believe, or Men. I'm not 100% sure, but it's this old mining town that he started driving me to this area, and we get, I don't know, probably quarter of a mile from the town, and all of a sudden there is burros, wild burros that were there from back in the mining days of early 1900s that are still living there as wild animals, but they feed them in this town. And they're all over the place in there. And people
when you say all over, how many are we talking here?
I probably saw 10 to 20 in this town.
Just wandering the streets.
Yeah.
Nice.
Before we hit the town, there was probably a group of 4 that were walking right in the middle of the road. And this is on Route 66, the historical Route 66.
Yeah.
And so people are driving it. It's a highway, and these donkeys or burros, whatever you want to call them, or the other word, they're just hanging out in the road and hang out there all the time. And when you get into town, it's now a tourist stop, so to speak. And it was a mining town in the early 1900s. It was gold mines that were in that area. They did really well for the time being. They pulled out over $24 million worth of gold in these 3 mines. And but now it's this tourist destination that people go and feed the donkeys. Every single little shop in town, you can buy a bag of donkey food for $1. And everybody's trying to walk around all the donkeys and shoving this food in front of their face and trying to get them to eat. And I found one that was on the side of the road because I didn't want to pay $1 for a bag of food, and I just picked it up. And I tried to feed a couple of donkeys, and they weren't hungry. So finally one of them took it from me. But
is it worth the detour?
Yeah.
For someone who's driving at least by the area?
Yeah.
Not somewhere you probably want to head for an actual destination. Maybe you just want to swing by.
No, if you're, it's about 2 hours south of Vegas. I liked it enough. I bought a shirt because I was like, hey, I got to remember this place. But it was definitely a cool place to go. And then, of course, you got to hit the taco stand in Vegas on the way home.
Oh, yeah? Is that what it's called, the taco stand?
The taco stand. They're originally out of San Diego, and then they built this new one there in Vegas. And their tacos are just outstanding. They're so good. These street tacos that are just amazingly tasting. So
cool. Sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Sounds like an interesting place to stop by and see.
Yeah. It was a little bit of drive, but it was well worth to get out and
cool.
see the donkeys.
And Dave's always got some interesting stories. So for all the listeners out there, I'm sure we're going to be enjoying lots of Dave's stories over the years. So
yeah.
One of these days you'll have to share your story where you helped was it a mortician load up the body?
Yeah, I did that. That was a couple different times with that one. That was a pretty good one.
Yeah, Dave's got some interesting stories that are pretty funny. So in today's episode, we talked to Damon Stone. Damon is a hunter in Utah. He's a very accomplished hunter, both mule deer, elk, and other wildlife. And one of the things that we focus on is we talk about finding enjoyment in hunting, not just based off of your success of actually harvesting an animal, but the enjoyment of just enjoying the hunt and finding different ways to enjoy the time that you're out there in the mountains and spending time with family and friends. So that was a big part of the discussion that we had. Another part that we talked about too was just challenges of elk hunting. Damon called it kind of elk as being his nemesis. Even though he's been successful killing elk, he's had a lot of interesting challenges over the years, and so he's called elk his nemesis. And so we talk a lot about those challenges. So we have a really good conversation with him. It's a lot of fun, and I think the listeners are really going to enjoy it. What do you think, Dave?
I think they will. I mean, it was definitely entertaining for me to listen to him and to pick his brain on what he does well.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, Damon was a lot of fun. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump right into the podcast. So we'll see you on the other side.
Sounds great.
Welcome, everyone. We're talking with Damon Stone today. He's a hunter from Utah, very accomplished hunter. We're going to be talking about elk hunting. One of the first things I want to talk to Damon about is I know he's killed a lot more mule deer than he could probably ever count, but I'm curious how well you've done with elk hunting. So kind of give us an idea, Damon, your experiences with elk hunting a little bit.
Okay. Well, first off, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
Sure appreciate you guys having me here. I've been way more successful with mule deer. They tend to be the prey, or the game that I actually like to go after more than anything. But I do love to chase elk, and I'd love to say that I've been extremely successful over 34 years of bow hunting elk, but that would probably not be the case if I counted my tags that haven't been clipped. But no, I really love hunting elk. I really enjoy it. The challenge, and I guess why I've been so successful with mule deer is that, they tend to pattern very well and easily, where my experience with elk is the only consistent thing that I find in elk hunting is its inconsistency.
Really?
So
it's interesting because I would have thought it was the opposite. I would have thought mule deer would have been a lot tougher than killing elk for some reason. But
and maybe they are for some people. I mean, I know guys that don't really know that much about elk, but every year seem to, take a nice animal and with all the time and effort that I put into learning and studying about elk or hunting them, it's just never equated into the success part of it.
That's hard. Yeah.
So, but with, you guys know, you're both elk hunters, one year you could find a spot that is Elkapalooza, and you have elk running here and there. So you have the highest expectations to going in the next year because you've learned a little bit more, and they're not there.
Yeah.
So I don't find that with deer. I've been hunting the same spot for deer forever, and some years we see more deer than we do other years, and other years we don't see as many. But elk hunting doesn't ever seem to follow that rule. So
is it just kind of a pattern thing you've noticed when it comes to elk? They just don't pattern as well, or just...
Well, it's when I first started elk hunting, I was talking to a guy who was a seasoned elk hunter, rifle hunter, and he said to me that once, he said, elk are where you find them. And I thought, well, that's kind of stupid. Doesn't make a lot of sense. But after all the years of elk hunting, I realized they are where they are. I mean, you can go into some of the most elk-rich habitat in the world and not see anything. And then, all the years that I spent filming hunters pursue elk, it was always amazing to me where we would find the elk. And it just, I don't know. They're the one animal that are really, really tough to figure out.
Yeah. So you and I have been hunting together for years, and I was there the year that you shot a bull. That was with a recurve bow.
Correct.
And I mean, it was a pretty cool experience because I remember at the time you were saying you felt like maybe you were a little bit it was kind of a curse with elk, and it had been kind of a struggle. So curious on.
Oh yeah, that was a good morning. It was a good morning. We hadn't seen or heard anything that morning. I was up the canyon with a few other guys that we hunted with, and I remember I broke off from them, and it rained that morning. And hit the top of the ridge, and when I hit the top of the ridge, I looked down, and I could see where an elk had put his his hoof, and as he lifted up, he pulled all the wet fodder with him. And it was just like walking down and following a track of dry tracks. It was the first time I've ever seen like that. And I followed him for about 200 yards, did a small cow call. He bugled back to me, and I use a tactic that when I get a bull to bugle back to me like that, I usually try to ascertain where he is and then cut that distance. So I boogied up the hill probably about 50 yards, set up on a little clump of rocks, just housed in with deadfall, and I could see him coming up the hillside, and he walked within 8 yards of me. So,
Really?
yeah, the closer the better.
Oh, yeah.
So.
And that was with the recurve, right?
That was with my recurve.
Oh, nice.
So what's your effective range, you think, with your recurve?
Well, I killed an animal in Africa at 62 yards, a blessed buck. But
wow.
I would say 98% of the animals I've killed have been 20 and under.
Nice.
Yeah.
So every elk I've ever killed with my recurve has been 15 and under.
Wow.
So
that's impressive, actually.
That's
Thank
really
you.
impressive. What was your draw to doing a recurve bow? I mean, what's kind of brought you to wanting to use a recurve over the years?
Well, I started out with a recurve initially, and then technology took over, and they started to make leaps and bounds in progress with compounds, and so I switched over to a compound, and the complexity of a compound just never really seemed to fit me. And I ended up missing a lot more animals with the compound than I had with the recurve. So I just dropped back into recurve, and I never looked back.
Nice.
So I know they're becoming a lot more popular. I see more and more guys hunt with recurves or long bows, and they are extremely effective, extremely deadly. They're extremely versatile. And probably one of the greatest things about them is they are light. So
oh yeah,
they are
see that.
So much lighter than carrying a compound around, and it's one of my favorite things. So
now the bow that you have, the recurve that you have, is it something that you've built or had made? Is that what a lot of people do?
No, it is a custom built recurve by a gentleman out of Colorado named J.K. Chastain. It's called the Wapiti. It's been around for a long time. So it's if you guys watched any of my hunting videos, you would know that I call it precious. And I don't let many people touch it. So
that is true. Now that I recall, yeah, that is true.
Yeah. So I actually think I let you shoot it once or twice.
Now, is it custom arrows, everything?
Yeah, I usually build my own arrows. Probably the last 5 years, I've kind of gone the lazy route and gone into carbon. Just tend to be a little bit more durable. But I actually prefer making wood arrows and shooting wood arrows. So
nice.
So yeah, I really enjoy that.
I assume you just went with the recurve because you like the challenge, the extra challenge.
It is a challenge. It really honestly is. I can tell you right now, there's been a lot of times that I'm sitting there and I've seen an elk or a deer at a distance that I won't take a shot. And I'm thinking, I wish I just had a compound. So
walk us through. Let's go back and talk about some of these hunting experiences where you said the elk are your nemesis. Because you were telling me earlier that you have plenty of opportunities. It's not a matter of opportunities. It just seems like things don't always work out. It isn't that you haven't killed elk. You've killed lots of elk, but you've had lots of opportunities where it just maybe kind of fell through.
Yeah, I've always said in my elk hunting career that elk are my nemesis because I've never had an issue or a problem putting myself in the range or in a position to where I can take a shot at a nice animal. It's just actually that point going forward never seems to work out for me. It's just, little tiny things that something that I didn't anticipate, and you try to anticipate every situation and every little thing that can happen, which I think makes a successful hunter. But I've just been plagued with so many things. I mean, like I told you earlier, if you wanted to make a podcast of just all my failed attempts at killing elk, I could probably drag that one out for about 2 or 3 hours. So
why don't you share with the listeners this story you were telling us earlier about this bull that came in?
Well, we were having a pretty tough year. I remember we weren't getting very many answers to bugles or calls. And the elk weren't very talkative. And, I think that if you're any successful elk hunter has a repertoire of tools in their back pocket when you're going to hunt elk. And, I tend to keep my eyes on the ground a lot when I'm walking, and I'm always looking for signs and stuff that something's passed by. And I'd come across this area when I was just out by myself that I could see just a crisscrossing of tracks. And I thought, this there's a lot of tracks here that would indicate that elk were using this as a transition area, either down to water or food. So I ended up sitting there. I stood there for about 45 minutes, and I could hear something coming through the trees. And I'd anticipated my shot to come in front of me, and so I'd set up planning for that. And then about 5 minutes later, I caught movement off to my left, and a bull had slipped in through some thicket that I didn't see, and he came in below me and then turned and he walked straight up into me. So he was standing roughly about 12 yards from me, and we were just face to face. And it was an incredible experience to be 12 yards from an animal of that caliber, to just sit there and stare at each other. And there's just I could see that his muscles were flinching because he was so unsure of what I was standing there. But I held still. I was at the ready and waiting for him to make a move. And I kept thinking, well, if he turns, I can draw back and shoot fast enough to maybe, put an arrow where I need to, but he wouldn't do anything. And, I don't know if you guys have ever been in that situation where you have an animal staring at you and you're trying not to move, but you become hypersensitive to every little thing going on in your body. And I could hear myself breathing into my mask, and I could hear my heart beating. And I'm thinking, how can this elk that's standing so close to me not hear this when he's focused on me?
Yeah.
And I can remember there was a rock under my right foot that I'm thinking, I don't remember that rock being there, but I could feel that rock digging in the bottom of my foot as this elk is boring into me. And he finally went to I think he finally got used to me being there, and then he turned to the left and started to take a step, and I kind of adjusted just so ever slightly, and he caught the movement, turned around, and went to another standoff again. And we sat there and stared at each other, which, it was probably 3 minutes. It seemed like forever.
Yeah.
And I knew I'd won the contest when I watched his ears start to kind of flip back and forth. And he stood back and peed, turned broadside, and chuckled. And I thought, oh, I won. And, anybody that shoots a recurve knows that you need to pick a spot. And I guess in all that time staring at an elk at that close of distance, that's the one thing I didn't do. So anyway, I killed the tree behind him. Oh, man.
Blew it up.
Geez. I took a picture with it. It was nice. So, no, it's just, and I could tell you, Lance and Dave, I could tell you multiple stories where I was in that situation that close and it just didn't work out.
Yeah. Shoot.
So, yeah. So, like I said, multiple stories like that if you want me to just keep going.
Maybe you were staring at his ears. You said you were looking at his ears. Maybe that's what it was.
Ears are such a good indication of the temperament of an animal.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it was funny. The last bull that I shot, you talk about trying to hold still. They're staring right at you or through you. I had something started crawling down my face. It was a bug or a spider, and I'm sitting there having this bull staring at me, and I'm just waiting for him to calm down, look away, do something, and this spider's crawling me, and I didn't dare move, and it was driving me crazy though.
So you know what I mean.
I do know
exactly.
What you mean. You know what's funny is you say that elk are your nemesis, but you're one of the most generous guys that I know when it comes to sharing your location or your spot, a tree stand with somebody else. And inevitably, it seems like those hunters that you share those with, they get elk. And not only do they get a nice bull or elk, they get something really nice. I mean, you had a friend that you did that one year with. You shared your tree stand, and didn't you shoot like a 7x7 or something out of that?
It wasn't a tree stand. It was a water hole that I've been hunting for about 17 years. And I'd killed a bull off of it. I killed a cow off of it. Initially, the first elk I ever killed was a cow off that water hole. And he was first time really hunting elk with a bow, and which kind of goes hand in hand with his success, which doesn't make sense to me. But, I remember we were sitting there at lunch, and he was asking me where he thinks you should hunt. And I had full intentions to go sit that water hole that night, but I knew he knew where it was, and I'd pointed out to him, and I said, listen, it's been hot all day long. The wind's kind of been picking up. I said that water hole would be a great place to sit. And about 6:30 that night when he texted me and said, I just killed the biggest bull of my life, which is the only bull at the time he had ever killed. But it was a 365 bull that for
Jeez.
General unit. I mean, double devil tines on him. It was, and it still makes me laugh every time I recount that story. When he called me and he said, he said he'd shot and it ran over the hill, and he said he could see the antlers just moving over the rise of the hill, and then they just disappeared. And I said, how long's that been? And he said, roughly about 30 minutes. And I said, well, just sneak to the edge of the hill and peek over. And he goes, okay. And he goes, should I take my bow? And I'm like, yes,
yes, please.
Take your bow. And it's a good thing he did. The bull was actually laying just over the hill, and he had to put another arrow into it. So, but yeah, that's happened to me more than once.
That's right.
But you guys know that if you guys help another hunter, you have success in that. You have ownership in that success.
Yep.
And I take that as successful. I mean, right. Last year was the first year that I've ever spent any amount of time helping a gentleman, a really good friend of mine, hunt elk with a rifle, that I wasn't successful in helping him fill his tag. It's a shot to my ego, but it's the first time ever in all my years of helping somebody elk hunt that I haven't been able to fill a tag for a guy. So,
and I want to hear about this story where you drew out on that limited entry hunt, and I think it was your brother that shot a bull.
Oh yeah.
And then you left something behind. I want to rehash this story.
Oh my! Probably my favorite person to hunt with in all the guys that I hunt with is my brother. And unfortunately, we just don't get that much time to hunt. But we'd drawn a limited entry hunt here in Utah, and I spent all this time scouting, and he didn't spend a day. I don't even think he shot his bow once or twice that year to practice, but we got up the next morning, and there were three of us that drawn the tag, and I'd had the tag, and my brother went one way, and my friend and another friend took off and went a different direction. So we were moving up through the cedars, and we just moving up through there. Wasn't really calling or anything, and I caught movement in this little opening, and these 9 deer file out of the trees right in front of us and crossed to our right about 15 yards away. And they didn't know we were there, and we just kind of watched them. They were actually had a pretty quick pace to them, which kind of made me kind of wonder what was behind them. And we didn't have to wait long because 8 elk come walking out of the trees. And at that point, I thought I heard a bugle. And these 8 elk, there was a really big spike that came in, but they're all cows. But they walked past us about 15 yards, and I looked at my brother and I said, I thought I heard a bugle up there. And he goes, I didn't hear anything. And I said, well, we should probably move up to where these elk had come out of the trees, and we no sooner get to that spot, and an elk bugles behind him. And I looked at him, I said, hey, bud, you better put an arrow in lock an arrow in, and he locked an arrow, got down, and I was standing probably 2 feet behind him, looking off to the left, and he was looking off to the right. And next thing I know, he turns around and his eyes are just huge. And I go, do you see him? And he turns around and he motions up the hill, and about 20 yards away, this bull is coming down the trail right at us. And I so wish I would have pulled my phone out and videotaped this, because this bull came down at 8 yards, 6 yards, 5 yards, 4 yards, and he stopped 4 yards away from my brother, and it was just a beautiful 6x7. And I don't know how you can miss that shot. And he didn't, luckily, didn't, but he ended up making a really good shot, and the bull took off running. And after giving it a little bit of time, we tracked him, and we'd got to an area where we'd lost a little bit of the blood, and I put my bow down and walked over about 20 yards, and I was sitting there looking in a different direction, and I hear this clatter, clatter, clatter coming up the hill, and this beautiful, probably about a 350, 360 bull comes running up the trees, runs right to me, stops at 10 yards, just stands there. And I just remember looking at him and then slowly turning my head back and looking at my bow 15 yards away going, they are my nemesis.
They are
my nemesis. So, yeah, it was a really good hunt down in southern Utah.
That's cool.
So, but that was his first bull ever. First bull ever shot.
Well, that's
impressive.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a good thing, man. I really enjoy elk hunting. I don't like packing them out so much,
but you're good at it.
I've done it quite a few times.
Yeah, I've seen you quarter them out. You're pretty quick at it.
So
that's funny. Well, that's too bad, though. Did you end up getting one? You never got one on that hunt, did you?
No. The hunt was, it ended, as it does here so often in Utah, it creeps up and ends on the 11th of September, and that year it ended on the 12th. And elk just weren't showing a lot of sign of calling and everything. And I had one opportunity at a bull that my friend had called into me. He moved up to about 20 yards, and he stepped behind a tree, and I could see probably about 12 inches of his side, but I couldn't figure out what part of the side it was of him. And I could have threaded an arrow through there, but it wasn't worth it. I'd much rather not get an elk than wound an elk, so I didn't take the shot. And that was it.
Dang it.
Yeah.
That's fun, though.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So
makes for a good story.
Got plenty of those, Lance. So
yeah, feel free to share. So when did you start hunting? I mean, what age do you think you were when you started to hunt?
Oh, I was introduced to hunting from little. I mean, I would follow behind my dad. I mean, it was a yearly tradition to, my dad never really elk hunted. That was something that I actually picked up on my own. But it was from just little. We just follow my dad around, watch him carry a rifle and shoot a deer, and then that was the hook. I just never lost that thrill and excitement that you get from being out in the woods.
Yeah.
So, and then when I was 16 years of age, I picked up a recurve just off of happenstance, and I never looked back. So,
what is it you love about hunting so much? I mean, just kind of in general.
Oh, it's a culmination of a lot of things for me, Lance. It's the camaraderie that you get with your friends and family. It's it's pitting yourself against an animal. I mean, and another reason probably why I like to hunt with a recurve is that it makes it that much more challenging. Yeah. And pitting your skills against an animal one-on-one out in the woods, and when that all comes together, that's just phenomenal. I mean, yeah. I can't tell you that all these years that I've hunted, that when I get an animal with a bow, I still get emotional. Still when I get up to that animal, I still get emotional that I'm out here and I get to experience this. So I think that when you lose that excitement and you lose that appreciation for the animals and the thrill of the chase, you should try to think of doing something else in life. So
yeah.
So no, it's just been something I've just always loved.
Well,
always
cool.
loved.
That's cool.
I think a big thing for me too is I'm not very successful, and I always try to, when I go out with my kids or something, I'm like, hey, did you see that sunset? Did you see that beautiful treescape? It's like I have to take other things in to compensate for my lack of success. I have to see the beauty of what's out there. And I think that's one of the things I think that drives us as hunters is just to see what's out there.
I agree with you, Dave. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I don't think, I guess as the older I've gotten, the measure of success to me is more in the experience than the tagging of an animal.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that year that I hunted that limited entry down in southern Utah was a hugely successful hunt for me. I mean, I got to witness my brother shoot his first bull elk at 4 yards. I got to spend the rest of the time with a really good friend going out and pursuing elk. It was a hugely successful hunt. I mean, we had opportunity. So, I think a lot of hunters nowadays gauge how good of a hunter they are by how many animals they've killed, but or taken. I don't believe that's...
Well, just like you said earlier, I mean, probably your favorite person to hunt with is your brother, and that was an opportunity to go hunt with your brothers, which made it probably just awesome, right?
Exactly.
I had heard somewhere, I don't know where it was, but basically it's this kind of like this formula equation that your reality minus your expectation equals your satisfaction. So if your reality of the hunt, let's say you shoot a big 350 6x6 bull, and your expectation was a lot lower than that. My expectation was a spike. Well, then you're super satisfied, right?
Really.
But if it's the opposite, if your reality is you maybe didn't shoot anything and your expectation is that you're going to shoot that monster bull, well, then, yeah, you're probably not going to be very satisfied if that's what you're focused on, right? If you're not thinking about spending time with family and being in the outdoors or doing whatever, if you're solely focused on just, being successful killing something, you're probably going to walk away pretty unhappy.
Exactly.
Right?
You're not going to come out of it with the experience that you should. And I think that, I don't know, I think that we've all kind of, as hunters, fallen into a trap to where, you see it on TV, you see it on hunting shows and magazines of all these hunters that are being successful, and there's so much more that goes into that. There's just so much more that goes into that, and again, I don't measure my success as a hunter by how many animals that I've tagged.
Yeah.
So,
and I got to be honest, probably the last couple of years, I've probably spent too much time being focused on being successful, and I probably haven't had as much fun. I can tell you the previous 15, 20 years, I probably had more fun because I just went out looking to have a good time with my friends and family.
You bet.
You bet. And now I'm so focused on trying to get something. It's like you get nothing. You're like, what? But that's the way it kind of works. So.
No, I totally agree with you, Lance. I mean, I've really come full circle where, back when I used to film and produce hunting DVDs, it was really interesting. Dynamic was I would go into a camp, some guy that I'd never met before, that he's allowed us to come in and film his hunt. And, I'd sit down and kind of go over, what my expectations, what his expectations was. And inevitably, one of the questions that I would ask these guys is, what's your expectations? What's the score you're looking for? Because, score seems to matter so much nowadays. Yeah. And, almost inevitably, it was always the same. It'd be like, I won't shoot anything 350 or lower. It's got to be 350 plus. And I'm thinking, wow, this guy's got high expectations. And then the next question that I'd follow was, how many elk have you killed? And most of them would say, no, I've never killed an elk before. And I'm like, okay, so you've never killed an elk before, but a 350 is what you're setting your sights on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's all this disillusionment of what the media puts out there, that you have to kill trophy animals and you have to go the distance and you got to drink this formula and you got to do all this stuff, because that's what's going to get you that big animal, that big trophy animal. And I think that I think it's kind of sad, but I do feel that the enjoyment and the love of just hunting has kind of gone away a little bit. Yeah. So
I had mentioned in the previous podcast where I described the first bull that I shot, the one that's behind me here. And I honestly just don't think I'll ever shoot another bull that will mean more to me than this one, because I went so many years without getting something to finally get one. This one here is just going to probably mean more to me than anything. I don't care what I get, just because it was just this huge weight off my back. It was exciting. It was thrilling. And so, it's, I agree with you.
So this last year, and jumping tracks, I was out in Missouri hunting whitetails. And I don't know if you guys have ever had the opportunity to hunt whitetails. I highly recommend it because they are really
You invited me one year and I couldn't go. And now I look back and I'm like, why didn't I go?
I'm telling you, you missed out. But so we were hunting out there, and just going back and reflecting on what you just said about the enjoyment of hunting. But it had rained all day long, and it was just a deluge all day long. And then about 2:00, it cleared up. Well, I love to be in the woods right after a storm because the animals, it just lights them up. So I hate sitting in blinds. I hate not being able to see everything around me. Yeah. However, it was windy and it was still raining a little bit, and I just didn't want to sit in a tree stand and get wet and cold. So I went and sat in this what's called a redneck blind. And this blind overlooked a field of soybeans. And I sat in there, and I had just one of the most exhilarating nights of my life of seeing just animals. I mean, bucks were popping out of the woodwork, and it was so much fun just watching all these deer pop out of the woodwork. I was having so much fun that my bow actually sat at my feet without an arrow knocked into him. And I was actually shooting a compound last year, but I hadn't had my release on or anything, and I'm sitting there, and I catch movement off to my left, and I look, and this just beautiful buck, 9-point buck, pops up out of the river, 15 yards off the side of the blind, looks at the two bucks that's standing out in the middle of the field, and he starts moving towards them. And I did everything I could to get my release on, get the an arrow threaded, and he was just moving out pretty quick, and he got out there, and I wasn't able to range him, but I thought, well, okay, I'm pretty good. I figured he's probably around 25 yards, drew back, shot, and I made the best shot on that deer. I mean, he ran out 80 yards, and I was just about ready to watch him topple over, and when he didn't, and then he flicked his ears, and he just kept on walking, I realized the best shot I'd ever made in my life was not.
Another successful story.
Another successful story. And I'm shaking my head because, you know, I mean, you just sit there and you wait for opportunities for bucks like that to come out. Anyway, fast forward a couple hours, and this buck pops out of the trees, and he comes walking down the fence line, and he's coming right for the blind. And I'm looking at him, and I can tell he's about a 3.5-year-old deer. He's not anywhere near the size of this one, but I'm thinking, you know what? It's not about the size of an animal for me. It's about the adventure of the hunt. And he got to within 20 yards, and I drew, gave him the infamous mat, and he didn't stop. And I kept matting, getting louder and louder, and he finally stopped. And I was kind of craned with the bow drawn, leaning, trying to get a shot out of this window, and I shot. And I made the best shot on that deer. Seriously, he whirled around, he ran out about 80 yards, and he stopped. And I sat there and I'm thinking, go down, go down, go down. And when he didn't go down and he just trotted off, I realized that was 2 deer I missed.
In one day.
In one day.
One sit.
Yeah, in one sit. So the reason I tell you that story is the next day, after I went back home back to the cabin that night and I licked my wounds, and wallowed in my self-pity of not being able to hit 2 deer at that close range. I went out back the next night and went to a tree stand that sat above this. And I was sitting in there, and these 4 does come walking out of the trees, and they shuffle by me and didn't even know I was there. And I could hear a deer come running through the trees, and this doe comes blasting up past me. And I look, and she's got a buck in hot pursuit of her. And this buck stops right in front of me at about 24 yards. And I'm looking at this buck, and I thought, you know what? Miss you once, shame on me. Give me a second chance. And it was that second buck that I'd missed the night before. Needless to say, he didn't get away the second time.
That's great.
So why I tell you that story is he is not the biggest buck I've ever killed before.
Yeah.
But that story means more to me than anything. Yeah. I mean, the picture of me sitting with that monster buck would have been awesome to share with all my friends, but the story of that hunt is so much more to me. So
very personal, for sure.
Yeah, one of these days I'll share that story where I shot that little raghorn bull a couple years back. I guess it was 3 years back, but my daughter was there.
Oh yeah,
and that means so much to me to have her there and actually witness and see this whole thing, no matter what size bull it was, right? That just means so much to me. So yeah, like I said, those experiences mean a lot.
Yeah, that was a cool time, Lance.
Yeah.
That was a really cool time.
You know, about 3 years ago, I had told you that I had just lots of experience. I never got a bull that year. But man, just the number of experiences that I had, just, running into bulls, just bugling back and forth to bulls, getting really close to them, just those awesome experiences made that year so much fun. I didn't get one. But man, what a blast. That probably was one of my funnest years ever, is just the experiences.
You put about probably 80 miles on your legs.
I probably did.
AKA mountain goat is what I call them.
I remember talking to the guys and saying, what mountain did Lance climb today?
Well, and the thing that kills me about Lance is he's like, oh, I'm down here. Okay, you're down there. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a second, he's up there. Not even like 10 minutes later, I'm like, what? Where the heck did he go?
Maybe that's my problem. Maybe I'm moving around too much.
He's the Energizer Bunny, man. When he comes,
what's funny, though, is the first year I think you and I hunted together, we had gone down after a bull, and I remember we were climbing back up the hill, and you were the first person climbing up the hill, and I was right behind you. But you flew up that hill like it was nothing, and I panted. I was having the hardest time getting up that hill, and we finally both got up there. I mean, you were hardly breathing, and I'm just dying. Honestly, it was that moment that I decided I had to get in shape. And that was 10 years ago maybe. I don't know. It was a long time ago. But ever since then, I have made sure that I am in good enough shape to go hunting that I don't feel that way, because I did not like that feeling, and I didn't like seeing you. I'm like, that was no problem.
I have a little bit of an advantage. I hunt just like the whole couple weeks before at 10,000 feet.
Yeah.
So I've conditioned myself at a higher elevation. And then when I hunt elk, we hunt at a lower elevation, and it just doesn't seem to win me that much. I mean, that was 10 years ago, and I can't say that's still the case. But
honestly, you're at fault for me waking up every day and exercising and trying to get in shape.
It's your fault, Damon. Jeez. Whatever.
How interesting. So, one of the questions we always like to ask people is, besides your piece of hunting, your bow or your rifle, whatever, what one item do you just have to have with you when you go out? What can you just can't go without?
Something in your pack or whatever.
Oh, Pop-Tarts. It's got to be Pop-Tarts. I really love Pop-Tarts when I'm hunting.
What flavor?
Blueberry.
Really?
Yeah, it's blueberry. I moved to chocolate last year, and I actually really enjoy those too. But no, I don't know, guys. That's a great question. I don't know if there's really one thing that I carry with me on a consistent basis that I used to always pick up a rock, a cool rock that I would found, and I did that for the longest time, and I had a really kind of cool rock collection. But one of my kids gotten into it and shook it all up, and the all rocks look alike now, and I can't tell. They used to have a little personal meaning to me, but they don't so much anymore because I can't tell which one is which. So. But no, I don't know if I carry anything specific with me, Lance.
I'll tell you one thing that I won't forget, again, I hope, is having a elk call read everywhere I go. Because last year in camp, sitting there at the table, and we hear a bull bugle. I grab my bow, we take off, and I find myself 60 yards from this two bulls fighting, and they stop fighting and they start to walk off, and I've got nothing to stop them. And I'm like, where is my reed, and I couldn't stop them. I mean, you try to make some noise or something, nothing. So that's one thing.
Not a call? Yeah.
That's something I better remember next time for sure.
Blade of grass. Blade of grass in the thumbs.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times I've left my calls, but that said, I can make a pretty good cow call with my mouth. I'm not going to now, but I can, and I have before. So yeah, calls are obviously, in your toolboxes. They're
that's a must.
They're a must.
Absolutely. So for you, what's one of the things that you would just recommend to other hunters? Just like a lessons learned over the years that you've thought of.
When it comes to elk hunting, is never go to the field with one tool in your toolbox. So in that, I mean, you don't go out there thinking that you're going to blow a cow call and a bull's going to come running in, or you're going to bugle a bull in. I think that you have a list of tools in your repertoire of elk hunting tactics and techniques to get out there to make you more successful. I would say that over the 34 years that I've elk hunted, my most successful tactic is finding an area that I know elk move in and out of, and just sit there and wait. That has paid off for me more times than it ever has calling in an elk. So I love to tree stand for elk. I love to still hunt for elk. Love to call elk, but I love to move, from one spot, call 3 or 4 times, sit there 15 minutes, move 45 yards, call 15 minutes, and move. I've been successful with that technique. So I think the one thing that a new or even a seasoned elk hunter can do or add any tactics or techniques or more to their repertoire of hunting skills,
that's a good
makes
idea.
You that way more successful.
Do what works,
Yeah, exactly.
What about, I guess assuming as well, just be willing to alter your plan,
be
right?
adaptable.
Because I think a lot of people, they have one thing in mind, and we all do. We kind of vision what's going to happen. I'm going to sit here, and I'm going to cow call, and the bull's going to come walking in, and I'm going to shoot it, and usually don't work that way.
It doesn't work that way at all. Yeah. I mean, I seriously, I've been on more elk hunts for myself and other people where it's just happened. It hasn't
Yeah.
been calling in one with bugle or with a bugle tube or calling in with a cow call or something like that. I mean, last year, the first night that I got up into camp, I walked up into a ridge that I've had success in, sat down and just sat there for an hour. And there was, a lot of fresh tracks coming through there. And I remember I thought, well, it's late. I better be getting out of here. And I got up and I started moving down through the lodge poles. And I got about 50 yards from where I was sitting. And I remember I heard a crack and I turned around and there was a bull standing 10 yards from where I was sitting. And I'm thinking, if I just waited 5 more minutes. And I went, dang those elk. Nemesis. Curse you. But I going back to what you said, Lance, your question, I believe being adaptable in elk hunting is the key to success for when it comes to elk hunting. So
Yeah, you never know when it's going to happen. Like you said, you never know when one's going to walk in. You know the story about me and my brother-in-law hunting, and he's trying to call in a bull to me, so I'm up on the hill. He's trying to draw one in, and so he's sitting there chilling out, drinking a Dr. Pepper and some barbecue beanie weenies, whatever they're called, and here comes a bull, just kind of walks right into him, and he shoots it. I don't know, it was like 5 yards or something.
Yeah, that was a good bull.
I know. I'm like, really? So apparently I got to start drinking more Dr. Pepper and barbecue beanie weenies, whatever they're called.
Barbecued beanie. He'd taken a nap before that.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah, he just woke up from a nap. So he was well rested.
Yeah. So, yeah, you never know when it's going to happen. So,
Genius.
well, Damon, appreciate you joining us. It's been a lot of fun visiting with you.
You bet. I really appreciate you guys having me over on this, and really enjoy talking to both of you. So,
Absolutely.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, if you guys want to call, I have a lot more stories that I could seriously just tell you of all the elk that I've missed in my lifetime and opportunities and close calls that I could share with you. I mean, so, next time.
Yeah. I'm down with that.
Just don't even ask me any questions. I'll just start going one story after another.
Nice. We'll definitely have to do it again.
2 hours later.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you having me on.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you.